Here we have the salmon and trout family. As I like to try to teach all my students, there's always an identifying characteristic which gives away the family. Most fish have 5 sets of fins. If you look at salmon and trout, up in that top picture, in between the dorsal fin and the caudal fin, there's a fleshy tab called the adipose fin. Adipose fin has no bones. It's kind of just fatty. If you find a fish and you see an adipose fin back there and the fish has scales, chances are it's a salmon or trout. And I say chances are because you have a fish like a catfish that has an adipose fin back there, but that's a scaleless fish. So generally speaking, you can narrow it down quite a bit. If you look at all these pictures, except for the one on the bottom left, all those fish have adipose fins. We'll talk about fish being anadromous or catadromous. Most salmon on the planet are what we refer to as anadromous, and there are many anadromous fish. So you're born in a river or a stream, and you live there as a juvenile, and then throughout the years you start to work your way out to sea. You live out in the sea or the ocean for many years, and then you come back to the same spot you were born, much like a turtle, and you will mate and spawn, and then if you're a salmon, you're going to die. That middle picture shows 2 Pacific salmon, one's head off, one's head on. They're the same species, they're king salmon, but take a look at the tails. The one on the top has a big full tail, and the one on the bottom almost looks like it was cut. It wasn't cut, but it was a farm-raised fish, and when it's swimming around in the net pens, dragging its fins across the nets, it wears down and then forms scar tissue and never grows back. So you can see in the bottom picture, the little rainbow trout, same type of tail. So those are the good things, little chef tricks to look out for in case someone tries to pass off a wrong fish on you. Well, probably the number 3 or 4 consumed fish in the country, off and on, the Atlantic farm-raised salmon. It's a very popular fish. We go through a lot of it on campus. It could be contentious. There have been some good farms and some farms that could do a better job. We actually use an amazing farm out of Canada, True North, where we get ours from. And the Atlantic salmon, the Atlantic farm-raised salmon, you can always identify by if you open up its mouth, its tongue is going to be white, its mouth will be white to gray. It will have spots on the gill plate. It's the only salmon that has that. Those dark spots go all the way down its body. They stop right before its tail. If you look at the anal fin on the underside, there's usually 7 to 9 bones. It's a very short fin. The fish is farm raised, and they used to be fed krill, which you'll see in that bottom picture, but they're not fed krill anymore. They're usually sardines, anchovies, and herring because krill have so many other high-dollar uses. So there's companies that make astaxanthin-based dyes, like that Salmon you see. So if you're wondering what that is, they add the dye to the feed so the salmon turns orange. And the fish needs those tocotrienols based in the vitamin A and E and coloration. Otherwise, they would not live very long. One of the 5 species of Pacific salmon is called the king. Now, all Pacific salmon have 2 different names. So the king salmon is generally found in the Pacific Northwest. It's the biggest, thus the name king. They're also the smallest in population. I believe it's only 3% of wild salmon are king. They swim great distances, so very high activity, very high flavor, very small population. Translation, very expensive. All Pacific salmon, all 5 species, will have a black mouth and black tongue. They're all going to have a silver gill plate. And then how to tell this one, it's got dark spots on a light body, and they go all the way through that heavily spotted silver tail. We bring in, and that's a farm-raised tail, remember, right? It looks like it was trimmed. We bring in a farm-raised salmon called Ora King from New Zealand, which is stunning. It's a very sustainable farm. They do a great job. They like to say that they are the Kobe beef of the sea, and it's pretty much up there. It's a very wonderful fish. Another Pacific Northwest gem, the coho salmon, sometimes called silver salmon because their whole body and tail is silver, is a very meaty fish. Some people like their fish to taste like fish, like me. I love sardines, anchovies, mackerels. This fish has a very irony, metallic flavor profile. So if you're trying to get someone to eat fish that says they don't like fish, they're meat eaters, start at it with this one. You can smoke it, you can grill it. It's got those, meaty qualities to it. Predominantly wild caught, but there is some small farming. The sockeye salmon, also called the red salmon because of its dark red flesh, is the smallest of all salmon. There's no sockeye farms, to the best of my knowledge. They're all wild. And, as they age and mature and go to spawning, their skin turns red, but that's not why they're called red salmon. It's their deep pigmentation. It's a lovely fish for smoking. It's a lovely fish for raw preparations. And also, as far as canned salmon goes, it's the premium product. So you'll have pink salmon and red salmon in a can. This one's more expensive, so it makes a nice salmon salad instead of tuna salad. You could flake it apart and make salmon cakes. You could just eat it as is. The pink salmon, or the humpback salmon as it's sometimes referred to, is a short traveling fish, so they don't develop the oil contents of some of its relatives. It's usually an inexpensive fish, and they have the largest population worldwide. There's no farming of this fish. There's no need to. It doesn't have the demand. And quite often it is put into cans. Where you see on the middle right picture, there's a male with its big hump and a female. They grow that hump when they go to spawn. You would never see that. That's just an illustration so you understand why they're called humpbacks. In the bottom right, there's a great application for this fish. Since it's low in fat, you could make something like salmon cakes or salmon burgers, like a pound of fish, a tablespoon of mayonnaise, 1 egg yolk, a little bit of panko breadcrumbs and some seasoning, form it into cakes, cook it in a little bit of oil. So pink salmon can be done very nicely. And, it's low in fat, so maybe add some fat. Put some hollandaise sauce on it. The cheapest of all salmon, the chum salmon, has quite a few names. It's sometimes referred to as winter salmon because they're spawn in the winter time, silver bright because first quality chum salmon are bright silver, but the coho fishermen don't like that. Sometimes referred to as dog salmon because of their canine-like teeth, but more often than not today it's marketed as kita, that first word inside the parens. Kita is an Inuit name for salmon. Most people don't buy this fish, but it's used for processing a lot. And one of the best byproducts that we get, and we'll do on the tasting on the last day of class, is ikura, which is the salmon roe caviar. But it's sometimes used by the locals for sustenance food or processing for fish meal to other feed or pet food. Now, all salmon that we've talked about so far are high activity fish. They generally live in salt water or they're anadromous. The whitefish is an exception to this rule. All right, we see that adipose fin back there. But this is a hard-bone fish. You really should do the up and over method of filleting on this because you don't want to tear apart the soft flesh trying to cut through these hard bones. The whitefish is often used for smoking. If you're up in the New York area and go into a deli or a bagel shop, you're definitely going to see whitefish salad. It has a slightly sweeter flesh than most salmon do. It's very nice, makes a beautiful saute fish. In the Midwest, deep fried fish. You may see Lake Superior whitefish being marketed. It's a hot spot for it. There's a town, Whitefish, Montana. There's a lot of whitefish there. Really nice, fairly small when we bring them in, a couple of pounds at most. In our fish fab room, one of the most common fish we bring in for practicing is the rainbow trout. Rainbow trout's originally from the West Coast, brought to New York in the late 1800s, and memory serves me right, I think the first trout farm in New York was 1924. You can find them wild in the streams and the brooks, but many times they're pond raised or raceway raised. Easily identifiable by having a light skin with a dark spotting. They're small, always under a pound. We generally buy them drawn, and sometimes we do get them butterflied. Underneath that is the brook trout, the New York State fish. It's the opposite. It's got the light spots on a dark background. Both these fish, if you open them up, have a slightly off-white, darker flesh. That's based on their high activity level. They're generally more flavorful than other freshwater fish. Now back to an anadromous species. The steelhead trout is the anadromous form of the rainbow trout. So they look the same. They got the dark spots on the light body. They got that purplish reddish haze on their lateral line. The one on the top is clearly farm raised. You can see by the small fin development compared to the wild one down below. Also, the one up top looks like its body's about to eat its head because it's definitely been overfed. They have that red flesh similar to salmon based on their diet. In the wild, they would be eating krill. In the farms, they definitely get the coloration in their feed. If you're on the New York campus, we have a lovely farm up the street where you've cut or will be cutting quite a few of their steelhead trout. And if you're on the West Coast, maybe you're lucky enough to get the wild ones. One of my all-time favorite fish is the Arctic char. This is the anadromous relative of the brook trout. Sometimes on the West Coast they're referred to as Dolly Varden trouts. Like the brook, it's got the light spots on the dark body. The background color could be green, as you see in this picture. It could be silver. Fun fact with these fish, when they're juveniles, their spots are white or very light against that darker background color. And as the fish grows up and matures, those spots turn pink. So the fish gets really colorful. Inside, it's got that nice bright red flesh based on the carotenoids from the krill or the feed in the farms. But a very nice fish. I would really recommend if you're going to put a salmon on your menu, this is a winner. It's got a kind of a toasted buttery flavor, just the right chewiness. It's not too soft, it's not too firm, and most people have never heard of it, but done very sustainably, and you'll make some real converts out of your diners.